I just wanted to add very quickly as well. I mean, one thing that we didn't touch on is injustices even within Christians. We've heard of pastors losing their wives to cancer. We cancer is something that you touched on earlier. And so there's also that injustice. So it's not
Hmm.
just outside of the church, you mentioning people don't want to come to
Hmm.
God because of that, but now we have people who are coming to God and that's happening to them as well.
Right.
So,
So it'd be the same thing to make the world a better place and make everyone
right,
more loving towards God and more accepting of this God who's all powerful and can do anything. Then yeah, I'd have to go petition him. That's that's not really working. You got people that are serving you, living for you. They are coming to church, and now yeah, the wife dies of cancer or the husband after everything that they've done. Really, that could have been prevented. You are all powerful God, so yeah, if things are going to ship up inside the church too, then that would have to be taken care of too. So God's like, okay. And so the question is though that we get to is at what point do we draw the line? Is there ever a line that should be drawn?
right. And an
And
honest
what would the
person
yeah.
could say, why don't we just wipe it all away? Why don't we wipe away all evil? And why does evil have to even exist to begin with?
So that's now we're getting somewhere, right? Because that's really what the question is coming down to. It's not, I have a hard time serving God with evil and injustice. What we're coming down to is right there is that when we ask, can we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? That the honest person comes back and says, yeah, why do we have to draw the line?
Right,
Why should there be any evil in the world at all anyway? And that's really the harder question is that people just don't want any evil. It's not because it'll never end. We may start all the way at the top with murder, which would be obvious, and rape, but we're going to find ourselves all the way down to old ladies shouldn't be getting mugged in the alley and having ribs broken. We know that that happens. Kids should not be born autistic or with any kind of disease or multiple sclerosis. And by the time we get down to the bottom, really what it's going to be is that humanity is saying that they have a hard time believing in God with any evil whatsoever on the earth. And that's really the plea. And so basically, what they're asking is, why doesn't God bring heaven down to earth? That's really what it is. Because that's the only place I know of where there's no evil. And so, in essence, people are saying, God, if you want me to serve you, if you want me to believe in you, there cannot be any evil, and I want you to bring heaven down to earth. And that I can address. But secondly,
right.
and just as important to think about, is my question back to you. How can we not have evil or injustices on earth if there are sinful and evil people on earth? And nobody thinks about that.
Right.
It's just, I can't believe in a God who allows evil and injustices on the earth. But my question back is, how can there not be evil on the earth if there's evil and sinful people on earth? So let's look at the
Right.
one you mentioned about the child being killed in the car wreck, or let's look at the one where the parents are killed because someone drunk was behind the wheel. And so here we have a man who breaks God's laws not to get drunk. And so we have a human being that we have that law, but that human being chooses to break God's law. And then not only does that human being choose to break God's law, that human being chooses to break our own civil laws in society, that
Mm-hmm.
it is against the law to drink and drive. And so we have a human being that chooses to break God's law. That human being also chooses to break man's law, gets behind the wheel drunk, gets into that car accident, and then kills the people in the other car. But that person says they can't serve God because of this evil. My parents were
Mm-hmm.
killed in a car wreck by drunk. I can't believe in a God that would allow that. But how does a God not allow that when there are people on earth who have a free will to break and violate those
Right.
laws? And so, poverty is horrible. I was subjected to poverty. I grew up in poverty for some time as a young child. My mom was a single mom raising three kids in a city, very expensive. And so we grew up in that. But poverty, a lot of times these situations, it was by a human with free will who had sex outside of marriage with no
Mm-hmm.
commitments, maybe just a fun night, got pregnant, and then we have a man, his free will doesn't want to have anything to do with
Right.
that woman that's pregnant, doesn't want to be a father, and so he disappears, and that woman is stuck with that child. So how do we stop that? That is all we see is the the position of that person in the end. They're struggling, they're in
Mm-hmm.
poverty, the kids are growing up in poverty, maybe the kids end up in drugs, it's a bad neighborhood, and all we see is that. But if we reverse it back to the night of that woman exercising her free will, that man exercising his free will, how do we stop that? Again, how do we stop evil? People say evil needs to be stopped, but how? And so you could say, well, I mean, how would God deal with that? Does he start zapping people out? Do people start just being killed? Lightning from heaven comes and starts killing these people? Or does God start violating their free will? And then if God is going to violate their free will, then we're opening up Pandora's box. Because if God
Right.
can violate their free will, then what does that mean? That he can violate your free will
Right.
and your free will and my free will. And so what we've done is we've opened up Pandora's box. And so the first evil that we talked about was murder and rape. So how would God stop that evil?
Well, I was going to say the irony is, I've seen this before, um, where people actually are like, why does God allow this evil? Why does God allow, somebody to be molested or those things to happen? But in the same phrase or same sentence, it's why doesn't he just kill them, or why don't they just do away with them? Why don't they give them the death penalty? So in the phrase of asking why is there evil, but yet, you know what I mean, like more evil to get rid of that.
Right.
Um
And then how, like earlier I said I went to God and I petitioned, right? When
mhm,
people say I can't serve God with evil and injustices, murder and a woman, innocent woman being raped. I just, how could a God allow that? And remember in the beginning I went to God and I petitioned to him for that, and God said, okay, no more rape, no more murder. No one ever stops to think, how was God going to do that?
right.
How is he going to do it? No one, you probably don't even know.
No.
I mean, we have to process that.
Right.
Everyone was happy that I went to God and God said, okay, it's not going to happen anymore. But no one processes it. It's all just emotion. How does God stop that? So the man is going and he has the intentions of killing someone. How does God stop that? Does he just zap the person? Does he possess them and
Mhm.
change their mind and take over that body, take over that human being's mind and send them like a robot marching in another direction or maybe walking off a cliff? Does he kill the person? Nobody can think about, I don't
Right.
know how God would deal with that. Same thing with the drunk driver. Okay, I went to God and God said, okay, no longer is that going to happen. But how does that not happen? And so, well, let them violate their free will. But again, we're opening up Pandora's box. It's okay until God steps in your face. And so, I'm not proud of it, but I have to admit that as a sinner, I did drive drunk many times. And by the grace of God, thank God, I never hit anybody, never killed anybody. But that could have easily happened.
Right.
But by my own free will, so are you wanting God to wipe me out? Because I'm one of those individuals that put myself in a position where I could have caused evil. I would have been that evil person because this is a true story about, this man who lost both his parents in an
Mm-hmm.
accident like that. And obviously they consider that an evil, and that man that did that would be that evil person. And so that's me. And so does God violate my free will? And so, of course, that man would say, yes, let him, my parents would be alive if he had violated the free will of that individual
Right.
to not get drunk and not get behind that wheel. But it's all fine and hunky dory until maybe one day that individual is going to a bar and he meets a nice young lady in the bar, and he's getting ready to take that girl home, and they're going to do what they do, and all of a sudden he's tries to step into his house, and he has this girl with him, and who's there in his house? God. He's like,
Mm.
you're not doing that. What do you mean I'm not doing this? You're not coming in with that girl. What do you mean? Well, because I'll tell you what happens. You're not planning on it, but she's going to get pregnant tonight.
Mm.
And you have no plans on being the father of that child, and you're going to tell her she's on her own. And that child is going to grow up in poverty and struggle, and so will the mom. And one of the evils that we petitioned God for earlier
Right.
was
It was
poverty.
poverty.
And so we want God to wipe out the evil of poverty. And so we've given God permission. You gave him permission to violate free will. I'm here to violate your free will. What would that man say at that point? Now that that free will is violating him, what he doesn't feel is evil, because that's why at the beginning we had to establish that. Who gets to define what is evil?
Mm-hmm.
People are saying, well, I can't serve God because of all these evil and injustices, but by whose definition? Everyone has a different definition of what their evil
Right.
is. This man didn't think anything of him grabbing this girl, sleeping with her, and impregnating her. And then she gets pregnant and says, hey, you're on your own. I mean, we're, consenting
Mm-hmm.
adults here. You should have thought about what he doesn't see that as evil. But that child who grows up without a dad will say, how could God had allowed me to grow up without a father in
Mm-hmm.
poverty? So what is one person's evil isn't always another person's evil. But here we said, no, God, you have the right to violate anyone's permission. And so that man would say, this is ridiculous. And he would tell God, you need to step out of the way. I have a free will. You're not going to tell me what I'm going to do. But then but that's what you asked for. Well, I asked for it in other people's evils, not my evil. And so that's
Right.
what many people fail to see. So I think the
Right.
biggest issue to address is that really what humanity is wanting is they're wanting heaven to be brought down here to earth, because what they describe they want sounds a lot to me like heaven. Like,
Right.
I can't serve God when I see the evils in the earth. And it
Right.
sounds like heaven. Revelations 21:4. It says, and in the end, in heaven, there will be no sickness, no disease, there will be no sorrow or pain. Another translation says, he, Jesus, will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain, for the old order of things will pass away. And so this is what people are wanting. They're basically saying, we don't want to have to come up to you to heaven,
We
because
want it
there's
here. Mm-hmm.
requirements for that. We have to live a certain way. We have to restrain ourselves. But no, they're saying, no, we don't want to have to come to you. You bring heaven down to us. And contrary to the song that is often sang sometimes in churches, God's not going to bring heaven down to us. We need to go to him. It's almost like the story of the kid eating at the dinner table. We often have people over for dinner, and I see
Mm-hmm.
this scenario take place many times when we're having people over for dinner. And so there'll be a family there, and the child just wants to play, and the mom and dad, the parent will say, no, you sit down and eat your meal, and after you eat your meal, you can go play.
Mm-hmm.
So after some time of whining and whining, the parent says, okay, just eat half your meal. You'll eat half your meal, then you can go play. And then after another 5-10 minutes of whining and complaining, then the parent says, okay, if you'll just take 2 bites of your meal, then you can go play. And so then after another 10, 15 minutes of whining and complaining, finally the parent says, okay, just go play. The child got exactly what he wanted,
Right.
and the parent gave into it. So that's what we are. We are that child, but now we are grown up, and we're saying we want to do what we want to do without any restrictions.
Mm.
And so that kid was not even willing to take 2 bites of their meal to go play
Right.
because they knew that eventually they would get their way. But God
Mm.
is not that parent that is going to be manipulated like that, but we think he is. God, if you'll just do this, if you'll just wipe away that evil. And at first it's murder. Okay, I just want to be like, I'll wipe away murder. But no, now it's not just going to be murder. Now it's going to be poverty. Now it's going to be cancer. Now it's going to be cancer for young people and old people. Now it's going to be rape. Now nobody is ever going to be born sick with any type of diseases.
Right.
And now it's going to be this. Now old ladies are not going to get mugged in alleys anymore. Now no longer are people going to die in car accidents. No more car accidents. No more drinking and driving. And it's like we're going to have it on our terms. But God is not that parent, and he'll never fall for that. He'll never allow himself to be manipulated like that. And so we don't want to do anything that God asks, but yet we want our world to be free of evil and injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that contradiction. So people
Yeah.
say, I can't serve a God that allows evil in the world.
Yeah,
But
I
if he
think
allows evil and sinful people to live in the world, how can there not be evil in the world? And when we say, well, who's evil? And then what if God turns to us and says, well, you are?
mm,
How many people are going to agree with that? How do I see myself? Obviously, if I saw myself as evil back in the day when I would get in that car
mm-hmm.
and drive drunk, I wouldn't do it. But I
Right.
never looked in the mirror and saw myself as an evil person. But I can't serve a God that allows evil in the world. Why would God allow that? But how is there not evil in the world if there's evil and sinful people? We'll get rid of them all until God's looking at us or you or me and saying, but you're one of them. And most people are not going to see themselves as that.
Right.
And so God's not committing any of these atrocities. So think of that. I can't serve God because I have a hard time believing in a God that allows evil in the world. But it's human beings that are committing those, not God.
Right.
So it's a contradiction. My issue is with God, but God's not committing those. The murder is not committed by God. Child pornography is not being produced by God. God's not the one driving drunk behind the wheel, but think about this, how the insanity. I can't serve God because of evil in the world, but it's human beings that are creating that evil, but yet they won't serve God for the evil that people are creating. It makes no sense when
Mm-hmm.
you really break it down. And so you have to be able to see the contradiction here, the duplicity. It just doesn't make sense. So we say that humanity is the one that commits these acts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a human being that rapes another human being. But God is the one that can't be loved because that human being is committing that act. And so what does God do? Does he kill all these people? Does he violate their free will again until it violates our free will? Did you have any questions or anything you wanted to ask? I know I've been rambling on for
No.
quite some time now.
Um, I was just gonna add, I think people often have a misconception of God and they think that, they view God as a genie, or I guess you could say a magician, where it's just, he'll wipe away everything.
A genie in a bottle.
Right. And all my wishes will come true. And which is why I said, earlier that even there's still I guess what you could say, the injustice with even there's things that happen even as being a Christian that we face. We see our family members that get sicknesses and stuff like that, and so I think there's that misconception of God, that people just believe that He's just going to do everything that we ask Him to do and say. But yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people argue that, again, going back to that, well, why doesn't God just kill them or just violate their free will? Just, if God is so almighty and powerful like you say He is, then why can't He just change their mind and change that situation, interfere in that?
Mhm.
Um,
Until it affects their free will.
right.
And so basically what people are saying is, God, allow me to be as bad as I want to be, but there better not be any evil in the world. It makes no sense. And so it's a complete contradiction. And so basically, what that question, just to sum this up now, I hope this answer brings some kind of clarity to this question. But what it gets down to is, if you were really to do, of course, this was just, an example, but if really in real life this played out the way I've talked about it, where
Mm-hmm.
people just kept bringing their evils to God, and God kept, okay, I'll take care of that. Basically, what it would get down to, if we were just to fast forward and save a lot of time, is what you'd mentioned earlier. Then why set any limits at all? Why should there be any evil in the world? And that's what people
Mm-hmm.
are missing, is that the world is not heaven, and we are wanting heaven to be brought down to earth, and that's never going to happen. And we cannot say, I am free to be as bad as I want to be, but somehow that there's no evil in the world. And so that is the deeper problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the problem of an uncaring God, as it's almost like we're trying to reverse the roles, like He's the problem. And that's why I just can't serve Him. That we're the problem. And so, and the fact of the matter is that God does do a lot behind the scenes that has prevented much evil. He doesn't wipe away all the evil. He doesn't stop all evil. We understand there's plenty of evil in the world, and there always will be, because man has a free will, and man has that free will to exercise his right to be sinful, and that is the fallen world that we live in. And
Right.
God understands these injustices, but these injustices will never be repeated. And so, because of our free will, we have ruined the world. And so, all these injustices, a lot of them are because of us. But in heaven, God's not going to allow us that second chance to ruin heaven with our free will. And so that's why there's requirements to get into heaven, to live in this land where there is no evil, which is what we want right now. There is going to be a place one day where there will be no evil, there will be no pain, there will be no sickness, there will be no sorrow, there will be no suffering. But there is going to be a life and decisions we have to make here on earth before we step into that other land. And we're going to have to begin to live that life here and show ourselves that we can live that life before we're allowed to enter into heaven, because otherwise it's going to be the same people polluting heaven
Mm-hmm.
that polluted earth. And so let me close with this thought-provoking scripture in John 3:19. It says, this is the verdict: the light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of the light, because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light, and we will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. And so again, God
Mm-hmm.
came to the world to try to deal with these evils. And He did sometimes step in front of people and challenge them And did people say, oh, we thank you so much for coming and challenging us in our free will? We thank you so much for challenging us in our sin, for calling us a thief, calling us an adulterer, calling us immoral. We thank you so much. No, the Bible says that the light came into the world, but people loved darkness instead
Mhm.
because their deeds were evil. So while everyone's complaining that they can't serve God because of all the evils in the world, the irony is that when God came to earth to try to deal with these evils, what did we say? Thank you so much for pointing these things out in my life. No, we said, put him on the cross. Who does this person think? I don't care if he is God.
Mhm.
We will not be told how to live our lives. And the Bible says that they did not like the light, that they dreaded it because they wanted to continue to do evil. So God comes into this world to deal with the evil that we complain about, but we send him packing. We basically put him on the cross. Why? Because he was trying to infringe on our free will. The
Mhm.
very thing that we're saying, no, God should violate their free will. When he did come, we did not accept that. And so then we crucify him, but then we also blame him for the evil that is in the world. And we can have it both ways.
Right.
We want to have our cake and we want to eat it. We don't want to look within. We just want to
Mhm.
point the finger. We want to blame God when he has done everything he can to try to deal with these evils. So hopefully this helps answer part of the question. Obviously, it's not
Mhm.
going to answer everyone's questions, but hopefully it sheds some kind of light on this very, very popular question of, if God is God, then why does he allow so much evil and injustice in the earth?
So another common objection I hear from people, um, especially online, is what about slavery, and why does the Bible promote slavery?
Okay, well, another good one. This is actually one of my favorite ones. Uh, People are saying, I can't believe or serve a God that condones slavery.